Phobia, cursed stories and creatures. Welcome to the scariest corner of Filipino folklore. Explore terrifying legends, cursed creatures, ghost stories, and true paranormal encounters from the Philippines. From the Manananggal, Capre, and Tikbalang to haunted places and spine-chilling mysteries, we uncover the darkness behind every tale. New horror videos every week. Subscribe if you dare.
The woman beneath the cemetery, Julio, had never been to the town of San Antonio. Before it was small, quiet, surrounded by hills and fog in the mornings, with a cemetery that stretched too far for how few people lived there. He was hired to be the new caretaker of that cemetery. After the last one vanished, no one explained why. They just told him the rules: sweep the leaves every morning, burn them before noon, close the gates by 5 p.m., and never open the underground chamber at the far back wall. Julio thought it was strange, but the pay was good, and he didn't mind solitude. The townspeople didn't talk much, especially when he asked about the underground chamber. They either looked away or gave him an odd warning. She doesn't like being disturbed. Julio thought it was just old superstition, until the fourth night. It began as a knock just after midnight, 3 dull taps coming from the back of the cemetery from the chamber. No one was supposed to touch. Julio lay in his cot, eyes wide open, heart racing. But he didn't move. The knock came again, this time followed by a soft dragging sound like a dress or cloth being pulled across stone. Then it stopped. He waited until sunrise and went to the back wall. The chamber was made of thick stone, sealed shut with iron chains and a rusted lock. He bent close to it. It was cold to the touch, and beneath his feet he felt something, a faint vibration like someone breathing under the ground. He stepped back, then noticed the flowers on the graves near it had withered overnight. But it's only near the chamber. Julio didn't believe in curses, ghosts, or any of the stories his grandfather told him growing up. But that changed when he found his name written in the dirt behind the chapel, near the cemetery fence, not once but 3 times, and beside it a word scratched in the same dust: Bukas open. He told himself it was just kids playing tricks, until he realized it was written on the inside of the window from within the locked chapel. That night the knocks came again, but this time they didn't stop. For hours they echoed through the cemetery walls, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes like fingers. And Julio didn't sleep. At dawn, Julio walked the rows of tombstones, counting. He had memorized each name. He had to. It was part of the job. But 3 graves were missing, the stones gone, the soil smooth, as if no one had ever been buried there. He ran to town, asked the priest, who shook his head and said the dead don't rest here, they wait. He asked for a name. The priest whispered it like it hurt to say: Danya Zelina. She was buried deep, too deep, because she asked for silence, and because her voice was never really quiet. She was a healer, a midwife, a woman who knew too much. When her child died during birth, they say, she made a deal with something dark, and when she was buried, the ground refused her. The roots beneath the cemetery dried up, the flowers wilted, the birds vanished, so they locked her spirit away. But they never destroyed her body. Julio tried to leave. He packed a bag, wrote a note, said he didn't want the job anymore. But when he opened the gate, he was back at the chapel, like the path had looped. He tried again, same thing. Even when he walked the road in daylight with his eyes open, the town bent around him, until he stood once more before the sealed chamber. And this time the chains were gone, just the stone door leaning slightly open. And the air was not air, it was heavy, thick. It pressed against his chest, and filled his head with voices, none of them speaking words. He ran, but the gate was no longer real, only fog. Only grave markers and names that changed when he blinked. For the next 3 nights, the cemetery came alive, but not with the living. Giulio heard footsteps circling the chapel, always slow, always barefoot, always dragging something behind them. Sometimes a child's laughter echoed behind him, but when he turned no one was there. Sometimes flowers grew from graves that had been bare the day before, and sometimes a soft singing filled the air, a lullaby that felt like a memory, but he had never heard it before. He tried locking himself in the chapel, but the door opened anyway, not with keys, just with her. She stood outside the chapel on the 4th night, just before the hour when the fog rises, a woman in black with a pale face, eyes like glass, and long wet hair that never moved in the wind. Giulio dropped to his knees, because she wasn't floating or bleeding or monstrous. She was beautiful, and she was crying. He didn't remember what happened after, but he woke up the next morning with dirt under his nails and flowers. His bed Giulio dug, he didn't know why, he just felt it, at the center of the cemetery, beside the 3 missing graves. He started digging with his hands, and found a wooden box no bigger than a child's toy chest, inside a cloth doll, with a stitched face torn in half, a bundle of black hair tied with red string, and a tooth, a human one. He showed the priest, who told him to burn it, but when Giulio tried, the fire wouldn't catch. The doll stayed cold, and when he threw it into the river, it floated back to shore hours later, dry, and the cloth now had new stitching. A name Giulio. That night, he went to the chamber. He needed to see her, to end it, to speak with whatever was buried too deep to be forgotten. He brought a lantern, matches, salt, and a blade. He walked slowly past the tilted crosses and broken tombs, until he reached the door and stepped inside. It wasn't a room, it was a stairway downward, and down he went, each step colder than the last, until the air itself shivered. At the bottom was a circle of mirrors, and at the center a chair, and on it her Elena, not dead, not alive. Her hands still folded, her lips moving, her eyes open and staring at nothing, until they moved and locked on him. She smiled. You came back now, we begin again. Giulio stood frozen beneath the earth lantern, flickering in one hand, salt shaking in the other, while the figure on the chair moved just slightly enough to break reality. Her skin was not skin. It was bark, bone, ash, memory woven together like forgotten fabric. Her lips never stopped moving, but no words came, only the sound of water dripping and wind trapped inside a sealed jar. Giulio stepped forward. The mirrors around the room flashed. In one reflection, he saw his own face, pale, broken, scared. In another, he saw himself kneeling, and in the last he was gone. She stood instead. Giulio whispered, "What do you want?" The air replied, not with voice, but with weight. He felt regret he never earned, and guilt that didn't belong to him. He saw flashes of fire, villagers, torches, the sound of a crying baby, and a woman howling like a wounded animal. He saw chains sealing her inside, and in every memory, he wasn't just watching, he was there, as if some piece of his blood had betrayed him, as if history had pulled him in as witness or heir. When Giulio climbed back to the surface, it was not night, it was something worse. The stars were gone, the wind was still, the trees stood too straight like they were listening, and in every grave he heard movement, some soft, some sharp like nails against wood, or whispers through cracks. The chapel was dark, but its door was open. He stepped inside and found every candle lit, though he hadn't touched them. On the altar a letter addressed to him, not handwritten, but etched like clawed into the wood. It read, "Roots are awake, you are not the first, but you may be the last. If you stay, they may sleep again. If you run, they will follow." Julio waited for sunrise, but it never arrived. Time bent, the birds never sang. The fog curled low and thick and stayed like breath caught in lungs. He dug 3 new graves beside the missing ones, not because someone asked, but because something needed it. He laid nothing inside, just salt, iron, rosemary, hair from his own head, and coins from his own pocket. He spoke her name, Elena, and the soil shivered. He whispered, "I am not them, but I am here now. Do what you must, but let the rest sleep." That night she came again, not at the chapel, not in dreams, but beside him, real enough that her feet left marks in the soil, her hands still folded but her mouth no longer moving. She looked at him with eyes that saw centuries, then stepped toward the grave he had opened for her. She didn't enter, she simply stood over it and began to fade, as if dust remembered how to be wind, as if grief remembered how to leave. And when she vanished, the fog pulled away from the tombstones. The birds began to sing again, and the gate at the front of the cemetery opened on its own. Julio didn't leave, he stayed. He swept the leaves each morning, burned them before noon, closed the gate at 5 p.m., and never reopened the chamber, because it was no longer there, only stone, now solid, unbroken, and the vines that once curled toward it now grew away. Visitors began returning, families left flowers again. The dead rested quietly, but every year on the day he first arrived, one rose bloomed at the center of the cemetery, black as shadow, soft as breath, and beside it 3 words written in dew on the chapel door: "You kept watch." The candle man walks at dusk. They always said never walk home at dusk with a candle in your hand, not in the town of Tabing Ilog, where the fog came early, and the river never stopped whispering. People called it superstition, just old folks with old rules. But they never explained the story, only said, if he sees your flame, hell, follow it. And if your flame dies before you reach home, hell, ask for something warm. And what he asks for you cannot take back. Dara never believed in those stories. She was 16. Stubborn, raised in the city and spending summer with her Lola. The house was near the river, where shadows gathered under trees and frogs croaked like old men speaking secrets. She liked walking at dusk, felt peaceful, quiet, like the whole world held its breath. One day, she lit a candle just for fun. That's when she heard the second footsteps. The candle was just part of an old altar left in her Lolo's drawer. Dara lit it with a match that burned too slowly, its flame low and red. She walked the old path by river, her slippers brushing dirt, fireflies watching from the grass. At first everything felt calm. Then she heard footsteps behind her, soft, wet, not rushed. She turned, no one, but the trees swayed despite no wind. She laughed, told herself it was the frogs, but the air was colder, and the candle flame never flickered. Even when she moved quickly, she stopped and listened, and heard something breathing, not behind, not beside, below. Dara reached the bridge near the bend, where the river widened. It was made of old wood and vines tied together with rope thick with moss. As she crossed it, she saw a figure on the far end, standing still, watching her. He was tall, wearing a long coat, even though it was hot, his face blurry, but smiling, not with joy, with hunger. She froze. He didn't speak, just raised his hand and pointed at her candle. then lowered it slowly to his chest, where something pulsed under his shirt. Dara backed away, the bridge creaking under her weight. The man didn't move, but his shadow stretched across the bridge to touch her feet. She ran that night. Dara couldn't sleep. She had thrown the candle into the river. But when she woke up, it was on her bedside table, burning, dripping wax into the shape of a foot. Lola knocked on her door, holding an old rosary, eyes wide with something between fear and memory. She said, "You lit the flame, didn't you?" Dara nodded. Lola sat beside her and told her the story. Long ago, there was a man who lived near the edge of town, quiet, strange, always carving candles. He made one for every funeral. But when his child died and no one came to pray, he lit one alone and begged the river to bring his son back. What came back wasn't a boy, it was something else. And it wanted more, so the candle man made a deal. If he could collect flames from the living, maybe the dead would warm again. So he walks at dusk, watching for careless hands and curious hearts looking for flames. And when the flame dies, he takes what's warm. The next day, news spread through the town. A boy had vanished, last seen walking home from the Sarasari store carrying a birthday candle. He found on the ground. His mother said she heard knocking at the door before dawn. But when she opened it, only water was on the step and the sound of something dripping. They searched the riverside, found only a slipper and a lump of wax shaped like a child's hand. Dara knew then it was real. She tried to tell people, but they said the candle man was just a tale to keep kids from playing with fire. Still more candles appeared in strange places, one on the church altar despite the priest locking the doors, one in the school bathroom burning in the sink, one in Dara's backpack unlit but warm. Lola gave her a box of matches, said each match used in darkness is a promise. If it lights, he sees you. If it flickers, he hears you. If it dies, he follows you. But if it burns until dawn, you're safe for one more night. Dara kept one candle by her window. She never lit it until the night she heard her name whispered from the closet, not shouted, not spoken, whispered like smoke curling in her ears. She lit the candle and waited. The room grew colder, the flame grew taller, and on the wall behind her a shadow appeared, not hers. The candle man stood near her mirror, his face finally visible. It wasn't burned or rot, it was sad, his eyes hollow but full, his mouth shaped like someone who had been quiet too long. He pointed at the candle, then at his chest, and a voice filled the room, not from his mouth, but from the flame. He's cold, he needs warmth, give it or share it. Dara asked, "Who is he?" The candle man stepped back, and the mirror showed not her reflection, but a child curled in a dark room, holding a candle made of bone, his mouth moving silently. Dara looked at the flame, then at her own hands, and blew it out. Darkness fell like a hand covering the sky. The room went black, but Dara didn't scream. She stood still, breathing slow, until her eyes adjusted. The candle man was gone. But her room wasn't her room anymore. The walls were lined with shelves, hundreds of candles, all unlit, but warm. The touch, each one had a name carved into it. She found her own, she found the boys, she found her Lolo's. She found names she hadn't heard before, names of the missing, names of those who had vanished without goodbye. Then she heard it, the sound of footsteps, but not one person, many hundreds, all walking slowly in circles around her. In the center of the room was a single lit candle placed on a stool made of bones and river stones. The flame danced like it was alive, whispering, "This one still burns, but not for long." She leaned closer. and saw something inside it, a face, eyes blinking, mouth gasping. As if drowning, it was the boy, the missing child, held in the wax like an insect in amber. Dara reached for the candle, but her fingers passed through it. The flame hissed. You blew out your promise now. You must trade light or life yours. Or his. The shelves around her began to glow, each candle flickering as names faded and returned. The room spun, and she fell to her knees when Dara woke up. It was morning, real morning, birds singing. Sunlight through the window, no candles, no flames, no shadows, only her Lola sitting at the edge of the bed, holding her hand and crying softly. He took nothing this time, she whispered, but he watched you, you didn't run, and now he remembers. They went to the river that afternoon and found the boy alone on the grass near the water, barefoot and blinking like waking from a deep sleep. He said nothing for days, but every time he passed a candle, he shivered. Dara never told him what she saw, only gave him a match and whispered, "Don't light it in Tabing Ilog. People still walk before dusk, doors close when the frogs start singing, and children are told never to carry light unless they plan to keep it alive. Candles are no longer sold in stores, only oil lamps and flashlights. But sometimes during storms, when the power is gone and rain covers the stars, you can still see a man on the old bridge, tall coat, heavy eyes glowing just a little, waiting not for you, but for the flame. And if you carry one, if you light even the smallest wick, he will see you, he will follow. And if your flame dies before you reach home, he will ask for warmth, and that warmth may be your name."
If you enjoyed this terrifying story, let us know in the comments below. Hit that like button to help us bring more cursed tales and dark legends to life. Don't forget to share this video with your friends, but warn them first. And if you dare, subscribe to this channel, because here in Pinoy Phobia, the horror never ends. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next cursed story, spine-chilling folklore, or true paranormal encounter from the shadows of the Philippines. Remember, some stories are meant to be heard, but others are meant to be warnings. Thank you for watching, and remember, whatever happens, don't look back.